Hello, hello, and it is a UFC prediction day. UFC Denver. Before I get to UFC Denver, I just quickly want to talk about this. Sierra Dinwiddie, a Canadian fighter, was booked to fight on Aries 23. That's the Aries FC promotion in France, I do believe. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the person's she's fighting name. It's a bit much, but 38 pounds overweight. Holy moly, apparently the fight was booked at 135, got moved to 155, and then she missed weight by 18 pounds over 185. So that is what? 173? For a fight that was originally booked at 135? Wow. Anyways, that's your random bit of information today. So we're going to talk about UFC Denver, obviously. We're going to make picks. We're going to hand it down. Let's talk about two things really quickly first that pertain to this card. One, it's in Denver. That means altitude. That means fighters with questionable cardio are a little more questionable than usual. And fighters with good cardio, but don't train or fight at elevation much, also very questionable. So that's obviously going to play a role here in making some picks, particularly in the main event. We're going to talk about that. And other than that, we have the usual statement. This is MMA. If you're looking at the betting on fights as a path to financial freedom, don't. Stop. It's just a little bit of extra spice to add to the card. Do not bet big money. Do not bet your house. There you go. Don't come crying to me if you lose like 50 grand. Somebody did that once, and I had zero sympathy on the matter. All right. MMA is too unpredictable for that shit. Main event, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez. I have to pick Rose. So there's a couple of things here that are going against Cortez. Number one, Tracy Cortez is really more or less just a wrestler. She's one of the better MMA wrestlers, women's MMA wrestlers anyways. But her striking game only functions to get the wrestling going or against people who can't really strike or against people who are concerned about the takedown and therefore have their own striking game pared way down. There's good pace to it. There's good volume to it. There's aggression to it. She throws in bunches. I like that. And she's working on it. I want to actually give credit where it's due. She's working on her striking game, and I think she's on a relatively correct pathway. That being said, she is a far worse striker than Rose Namajunas. And realistically, the way to beating Rose has never been control top grappling. It just hasn't been. She can be taken down. Amanda Ribas, Carla Esparza, Weili Zhang, Jessica Andrade, Michelle Waterson-Gomez, all people who have taken down Thug Rose. And I expect to see her get taken down in this fight by Cortez. I do expect that. But it is a 5-round fight. And there is a lot of good scrambling, a lot of good counter grappling to Rose's game. She is very, very hard to control. You can even notice that like Weili Zhang took her down and actually got out-controlled by her in their, I think it was the second fight they had. And obviously, she ended up winning that fight. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Like the only people who have won via grappling on her is like really, really, really early Carlos Esparza, the first fight. And then Jessica Andrade, who is a, well, let's just say Jessica Andrade's way of winning that fight was by being a freak, which is tends to be how Jessica Andrade works in general. And indeed was the second fight. The first fight was the head kick with Weili Zhang. I was trying to remember which was which. Anyways, am I a little bit concerned about like Thug Rose losing? Sure. Little bit, tiny bit. She's a fairly mentally unstable fighter. Realistically speaking, she's not like crazy or anything, but like that second fight with Carla Esparza is just always going to be there moving forward. Like there's no way for me to forget about that fight and how that performance colors everything about her. And obviously the situation with having Pat Barry in the corner where the cornering advice is, in a word, bad or ineffective. There is that worry. There is that concern. But stylistically, this is a matchup she can deal with. Also, Cortez has been talking really honestly just some crazy stuff about the altitude. She was like 2 days in. I'm good to go. I'm ready to rock. There's a huge difference between fighting and like living at altitude. These are two different things. And then on top of that, she's talking about how Thug Rose has never fought a real flyweight before, which to be clear is she has never beaten a real flyweight. I will give you that. But she fought Menon Fiorot. And don't get me wrong, she lost that fight, but it was a fight that was against one of the best, top 5, at least, flyweights in the world, very competitive. And at no point did Fior do things that Cortez can replicate to get that win. Like, it's just not even similar. So there you go. I've got to pick Thug Rose, probably via TKO. I'm thinking decision is possible. Submission is on the table. It could go either way. There's not an obvious way that Cortez loses, but I just assume that at some point over a 5-round fight at altitude, and Thug Rose trains at altitude and has altitude cardio, that she'll just slow down enough for Thug Rose to hurt her and finish her. That's what I'm going on. Thug Rose is the favorite at minus 200 to minus 235. Cortez plus 165 to plus 180. Not much more to say about that fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Muslim Salikov. I don't like this as a co-main event. For one thing, it's a battle of two guys that are 77 years combined age. I guess I'm down for like two old guys fighting each other, whatever, and like maybe do like a double retirement would be nice. But there's not a lot of positives to take from their last 4 fights. Like they're both 1-3 in their last 4. They both have wins that I don't think really hold up all that well. Ponzinibbio knocked out Alex Morono, who is Alex Morono, a very low tier athlete in the game. Salikov beat Andre Fiallo. I don't think I need to explain why that doesn't inspire confidence because it's Andre Fiallo. And the real problem I have though is it's like 77 years old guys, guys who are physically in decline. I think it's fair to say that. Fighting at altitude. That seems, I don't know, it seems really bad. So in their primes, I would have taken Ponzinibbio easily. I think he's the more athletic guy. I think that Salikov's game plan, which is very, very in and out, like it's either swamp you in the clinch and take you down, or it's work at you from the outside, would work way better if he didn't have like a similar build to me, which is having a 5'11" height and a sub 6 foot reach. It's 70 inches on paper. So I think that always is a limiting factor. And he's also very low output. And I've never really thought that it's a lack of cardio. So I think actually, I don't think the cardio is necessarily a concern here. I think he just is low output and it's by design as opposed to any kind of concern about being tired. But like, it's worth noting that like, despite landing 10% more of his strikes, he lands 1.5 strike less per minute than Ponzinibbio. That is hard to win a decision unless you're going to finish the guy. And it's not that Salikov couldn't finish him. I mean, Ponzinibbio, post his medical issues, is a guy who has some durability concerns. So like, that is on the table. But I don't see it. I got to go Ponzinibbio, but who knows? It's a battle between two guys who are kind of far along in their careers. They're nearing the end. I don't really like this as a co-main event. I don't really like this for the venue, but it is what it is. Ponzinibbio by decision. He is the favorite, minus 185 to minus 225. Salikov plus 150 to plus 175. Drew Dober versus Jean Silva. A very short notice booking here to replace Mike Davis at lightweight for Silva. I've got to take Dober. The reason essentially is this. Jean Silva, don't get me wrong, impressive. Knocked out Charles Jourdain. Made it look easy last time out. I have my eye on him in a way that I did not before. But his game still is very bullyish. And how well does that translate going up a weight class? And can you actually bully Drew Dober? I mean, he did get stopped by Matt Frivola, so maybe Silva can do something similar to that. But like, Drew Dober is very durable, very hard to bully, and hits really, really hard. So I look at Silva's defensive liabilities. I look at him fighting a weight class up. I look at him fighting on short notice. I look at him fighting at altitude. I think for possibly the first time, I got to go with Dober. I got to go with Dober to be the bigger guy, the stronger guy, the harder hitting guy. And if Silva is going to be aggressive and open to essentially a brawl, a pocket brawl when it comes down to it, the kind of fight that Dober will definitely like lose exchanges in and whatever, but will probably win. Silva just doesn't really have the aspects that have historically given Dober trouble. Like, he doesn't have Moicano's ground game. He doesn't have Matt Riddell's comprehensive striking game. He's just not Islam Makhachev, period. So I'm worried enough that like something could happen, but like, yeah, I gotta go with Dober. And then you got Gabriel Bonfim versus betting odds. Dober is minus 110 to minus 115. Silva minus 105 to minus 113. I'm betting on Dober at those odds. It's very, very close. I've got him by TKO. Gabriel Bonfim versus Ange Loosa. I don't really know how this fight plays out because they're both guys that are coming off a loss. And it was a damaging loss to a certain degree. More so for Loosa because he looked lost against Brian Battle. Like, on paper, they were like separated by like 3 strikes or whatever. But there was a definitive, I don't know what to do with a guy who has a bit of a range game and a length and a rangy frame. I don't have good ways of establishing the pocket. I don't have good entries. And Losa's not really a wrestler. He's more or less just kind of like a very bare bones kickboxer. The very early product of a Henry Hoof system, which is very, very good, but it takes time. Gabriel Bonfim lost to Nicholas Dalby. There's no real shame about that, but I think it's still put on display some like lackluster defensive items he has, some trouble in the pocket, particularly that could come up here that Loosa could possibly, if he can get in the pocket for long exchanges, actually make work because he's got the power, he's got the speed, he's got the physicality. He is the athlete that you would want for this. But I think at the end of the day, I got to go with Bonfim. Probably a club and sub. Probably hurts Loosa at some point, gets submission. He does have a very venomous choke game. He is quite athletic. He is pretty reasonably sized. Although, surprisingly enough, he only has a 72.5-inch reach on a 6'1" frame. I don't know. He always felt lankier than that. I don't know. Loosa apparently actually will have the reach advantage of 74 inches. But still, it's also an age thing. 30 years old, Loosa is a developing fighter, but no longer a prospect. And Bonfim at 26 still probably could make some leaps and jumps. And that was a first loss for him against Dalby. And I'm intrigued to see what he's learned from it, what he can maybe be better. Maybe, this leads to a comfort in the pocket that was not there before. Maybe it just breaks him. We'll find out. So Bonfim by club and sub. He's minus 325 to minus 390. Loosa's plus 260 to plus 280. The betting public appears to be more sold on Bonfim than I am. But I do think you have to pick him. Christian Rodriguez versus Julian Erosa. The only concern here for me is that, like, Erosa is coming back up to 45, which he should have to do because, he's missed weight, twice at 135 and quite badly. He should be able to make 135. He's not even that big of a 135er, but you know what? You can't sort out your weight cutting. You're at 145. Sure, he's tiny compared to Erosa. Erosa is going to be 6 inches taller, although stunningly only 3.5 inches of reach. Rodriguez has an insane reach, 71 inches on a 5'7" frame. Jesus. Anyways, I still have to pick Rodriguez to win. Erosa is a guy I'm never going to really feel comfortable picking. He's very dynamic and very dangerous. Like, he's the sort of guy who can beat anybody, and I'm not going to be surprised. I'm not going to be stunned if he hurts somebody with his punches. He has odd angles that a 6'1" frame gives him. He can hit the button. He hits pretty hard. He's got a dynamic submission choke game. He is kind of like, actually, a lot like Bonfim that we just talked about, but like with for his weight class, way less physically imposing profile. So I still have to go with Rodriguez. He's got a very good technical kickboxing game. He works well at all 3 ranges. He has a wrestling game if he needs it. He's very safe. The defense is good. He's the sort of guy who seems to fight pretty well when behind the ball. So, like, even if Erosa hurts him, one would think he can survive that, probably, and work his way to a decision. But, like, I also don't really understand the point of this fight because in the case of Erosa is too weird to really be a test fight for anybody. Erosa should be out there fighting like action fighters, just having fun. Guys like a Charles Jourdain, just bringing him up because I talked about him obviously because he lost to Silva. Like, that's the type of guy that I think you should run him against. And I know he's fought him before. So, like, I'm not saying run back Jordan versus a Rosa repetitively, but like that kind of dynamic. And Rodriguez is a up-and-coming prospect to a certain degree. He's 26 years old. He's got some growing to do. I don't think he's a future champion. I don't even think he's particularly a future ranked fighter, particularly if he can't sort out the weight cutting. But like, he's a guy who should be getting tested in ways that are more replicable and insightful going forward. And Erosa just isn't really that. So I don't love the matchmaking. I do think it'll be a perfectly fine fight. I have Rodriguez by decision. He is a minus 205 to minus 235 favorite. Erosa plus 170 to plus 180. Feels about right. Then we have a 185 fight that is going to be opening up the main card, and I don't know why, because number one, we're going to talk about Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson later. We're also going to talk about Montel Jackson, Damon Blackshear later, which probably belongs on here more than this. And we're probably, you know what? I'm even going to say that like Luana Santos and Maria Agapova and Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Fatima Kline, they belong on the main card more than this fight. And that is Cody Brundage versus Razak Al-Hassan. I'm just going to pick the underdog here, which is apparently Brundage. He's a plus 130 to plus 143 underdog, minus 163 to minus 175 to Al-Hassan. I don't believe either of these guys have like any definitive like advantages here. Don't get me wrong. There are things that they are better at, but like in terms of defining the fight, I don't know. Brundage is a decently potent offensive wrestler, but not good defensively. Not good defensively as a striker. Not even good offensively as a striker. He's messy and sometimes catches people though. And he scrambles well. And Al-Hassan is just power. Like both as a puncher and as a takedown guy. Like, and I don't know, like it's altitude, and Razak Al-Hassan has historically had some issues with like with cardio. So I guess that probably also plays into the Brundage thing. I'm going to go Brundage by decision. I don't care. This is going to be a very messy fight that I have no real interest in. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be fun. Like messy can be fun. Like that's on. It's on there. Then you have Joshua Van versus Charles Johnson. This should be on the main card. Joshua Van is one of the most exciting up and comers at flyweight. We're not lacking in those, obviously, because we got Tetsuya Taira coming up as well. Maybe we have Ray Sarira as well. And then there was he beat the Korean guy from Road to the UFC. He looks actually pretty okay. Anyways, what I'm saying is that like the future of flyweight's pretty bright. Showcase it. Let Joshua Van have a main card spot here against Charles Johnson. This is excellent matchmaking because you have a serious prospect in Van who's got a great pace game, throws in combination, likes to counter well, seems to actually have a pretty good knack for wrestling. I wouldn't recommend it here against Charles Johnson because wrestling with Charles Johnson has historically not been the greatest of ideas. It's not that it doesn't lead to victory because obviously Muhammad Mokaev did beat him and that was key to that. But like, and Rafael Estevan as well. But like Joshua Van is not a Mokaev. He's not a Estevan. He does not have that kind of wrestling game. So like this is going to be something I think he needs to win by making this into essentially more or less a kickboxing match. And in Johnson's case, very well rounded, like I said, doesn't fight at the highest pace you'd want to see at 125, but he periodically will match a pace. He doesn't just let himself get paced out of a fight. So this is going to be interesting. This is going to be fun. I would like to talk about this fight a lot more. Like a lot more. Like I would like to spend like 10 minutes on this fight. But the dynamic is right there. Van is going to try to put a pace on Johnson. He is going to try to outland him. He is going to try to sting him on the counter and hopefully do minimal wrestling. And in Johnson's case, he is probably going to meet him with very close levels of activity and maybe try to wrestle him a little bit. I got Van by decision. I'm being positive. I'm hoping that like this is a prospect testing moment that he passes. And he's minus 200 to minus 225 as a favorite. Johnson plus 163 to plus 190 as an underdog. Talking about prospects, Fatima Kline is making her UFC debut on short notice. She is a very exciting addition to the women's ranks here. She is an excellent grappler, top tier. And she's pretty vicious with the ground and pound too, which I like. She's got good ground and pound. She's got excellent control grappling, very good positionally, has submissions, a wide variety of them, will attack things. But despite all those things I said that were really, really positive, I have her losing this fight because she's debuting at 125. She's a 115er naturally, and she's facing a big 125. Jasmine Jasudavicius is very big and a very competent wrestler when it's brought to her. Like, her wrestling is not the greatest in terms of engaging. That was like a big problem in a number of fights. But if you're going to be the shorter fighter, the less reach fighter, you're going to come to her. It's going to lead to grappling exchanges. It's going to lead to scrambles, counter wrestling, takedowns, and so on. And I just have Jasudavicius probably coming out on top on that. She is very, very good at that. And while she's not a particularly good striker, she's the better striker here. She is the functional striker, whereas Kline is very much a work in progress to get to that level. So, welcome to the UFC, Fatima Kline. I'm looking forward to big things. That being said, Jasmine Jasudavicius is literally too big of a challenge to take in the first one, I think. So, Jasudavicius by decision. She is a minus 110 to minus 125 favorite, or 121 favorite. Kline is plus 100 to minus 113. So, Kline is a favorite some places. If you can get Jasudavicius for like plus 110, that's a good pick. Then we have Montel Jackson versus Damon Blackshear, two guys who I'm worried about because they're both huge and they both presumably cut a lot of weight to make 135. And that's not usually great for cardio at altitude. Just going to say it. That being said, I've got to take Montel Jackson. The reason is pretty simple. Montel Jackson is the even bigger guy. Like Blackshear is fighting a guy bigger than him, possibly for the first time ever. Or at least, a rarity. He's 3 inches less in reach, and Jackson just looks bigger, more built. They're both 5'10", apparently. Jackson is the better striker of the two. Blackshear's striking game is based around like being taller than people and like making them uncomfortable facing somebody with the reach he has. And he does have a pretty good jab, and he will kick. It's not something that I think will like win prolonged exchanges. And again, with Blackshear having 3 inches of reach, or with Jackson having 3 inches of reach, he's going to make those exchanges happen. And when it comes to the grappling, I do like the funkiness of Blackshear, the twister that he got and so on. There is a lot of excitement there. There's a lot of weird stuff there. There's a lot of creativity. I guess at the end of the day is really what sums it up. Like, one of the few guys with a twister win in UFC history, but I can't pick him to win it. I can't pick him to win it. Jackson is the stronger guy, the more functional striker, the more powerful striker, and I don't think he's ever been submitted, and he's faced off with a bunch of like really solid grapplers over the years. He's 13-2. His losses are to Brett Johns, went the distance, and Ricky Simone. Ricky Simone not looking great right now, but Ricky Simone is quite good. But those are two guys that Blackshear can't really replicate. And the only real concern, I guess, is that Jackson has had 3 fights fall apart. Only one was him pulling out, though, which was Chris Gutierrez's fight back in October of last year. The other 2 were Saeed Nurmagomedov and Farid Basharat pulling out. So hopefully he's a little bit healthy, but he's never been the most active fighter. There's always been a lot of withdrawals and a lot of injuries to him to the point that he has never fought more than twice in a year since 2018. So there you go. It would be nice to see Blackshear pick up a win, but I got to go with Montel Jackson by decision. He is the minus 135 to minus 156 favorite. Blackshear plus 114 to plus 122. Lana Santos versus Maria Agapova. I have no idea what to expect in this fight because in Santos' case, she was up at 135 recently and looked huge. I have no idea how she makes 125. Anyways, we haven't learned our lesson about this. There you go. And then Agapova is just a crazy self-destructive fighter. So, I guess I'll go with the weight bully Santos. She's strong. She has a good grappling game, mostly of a positional nature. But I don't know. It's just kind of weird to be. It's kind of weird to have been up at 135, and I think missing weight, if memory serves. Let's see here. Luana Santos fought Stephanie Egger at 135, weighing in at 139 in that fight. And I think it was short notice, but still, she made weight for the fight with Juliana Miller. I don't know. She hasn't missed weight at 125. It's just I can't believe that it works, and we're at altitude, so that's concerning. But like Agapova hasn't fought in like 2 years and is a complete head case of self-destructive destruction. There you go. And she's prone to getting submitted as well. Marina Moroz submitted her. Jillian Robertson also submitted her. So like she's lost both of her last 2 fights by submission. She's facing a submission specialist. Yeah. Santos by submission. But there is a big question mark over that fight just because of the altitude nature and the nature of 2 unreliable fighters. Santos is minus 350 to minus 430. Wouldn't bet on that. Agapova plus 260 to plus 310. If you must bet on this fight, take the underdog, but I wouldn't recommend that either. Josh Friend versus Andre Petrosky, 185-pound fight. By the way, this is a better one than the other 185-pound fight. Anyways, I got to go with Petrosky. He's never going to be a serious contender. He's 33 years old, coming off a loss to Jacob Malkoun and Michel Pereira. Dude has some cardio issues, which is a concern here, but he fights well tired. Like he's the type of guy that gets tired and just keeps going, which may serve him well at altitude. But Josh Fremd is a scrappy big dude, but he's not super durable. He's not super good at striking. He's not super good at wrestling. He's not super good at grappling. If you're going to face a specialist and be like a very non-specialist, but not particularly good at anything, you're probably going to end up grappling with Petrosky a lot. Petrosky has the strength to probably make up for the size differential, put him on the canvas, and at some point find a submission because Fremd will give up his neck. I mean, if you get guillotined by Trayshawn Gore, if memory serves, it was Gore I'm thinking of. Yeah, and you get, well, I guess that is his only submission loss, and Gore is kind of weird athletic. I don't know. I still got to go with Petrosky by submission. There you go. I don't know. I'm not really looking forward to the fight, but it's not a terrible booking, so why not? It's just the only thing about it is I have no idea why you would book Andre Petrosky, a guy with a history of like questionable cardio, on a Denver card. That doesn't really make any sense. We wrap up this short prediction video with Evan Elder versus Darius Flowers at 170. Both of these guys are 155ers. That being said, Elder has looked very small when he's gone up to 170. And Flowers is a guy who doesn't look out of place at 170. I mean, he's short, but he's a tank. Anyways, I'm never going to pick Flowers. It's going to be fun because Flowers is a completely chaotic mess. He will slam you. He will throw the biggest overthrown punches on the planet. He's bad. He's a reasonably like a pretty plus athlete who is explosive and strong and powerful and all that. But there is no structure. There's no structure to his game. Elder is the taller fighter, same reach. He's got a pretty decent boxing game on him, pretty decent kickboxing game. He looked pretty good against Nazim Sadikov, albeit in a loss when they clashed heads and he got a cut, had to have the fight stopped. And then his win over Gennaro Valdez doesn't really mean anything. So I guess the negative for Elder is that he's never really beaten anybody that you would consider to be like UFC caliber. Like his best performance is a loss to Nazim Sadikov, and other than that, loss to Preston Parsons. But he looked competitive in both of those fights, whereas Darius Flowers has lost to the ghost of Michael Johnson and Jake Matthews, and beat some dude by injury from a slam on the Contender Series, and has been knocked out a bunch of times in boxing. So yeah, Elder by TKO at some point. Like Flowers will just like kind of spontaneously combust. It'll be fun up until then. But you've got a guy who is structureless and will go all out in the early going at altitude against a guy who I think is actually a reasonably serious, like, action fighter, mid-ground guy at lightweight. So Elder, TKO, he's the favorite. minus 425 to minus 460. That's a little bit wide. And Flowers plus 320 to plus 330. But I'm not picking Flowers, and I would not recommend betting money on him. Anyways, that's the card. It's not terrible, but it has some weird structural things, and there are a couple of fights that I just don't really think should be happening at all, or at the very least, not at altitude. So there you go. That's the UFC we got after taking a break. And check out the links down below for my social medias, my video gaming stuff, and well, that's about it. So I'll see you after the fights.